The handcuffs dug into his wrists as his new phone lay shattered on the pavement. Hundreds watched, but no one stepped in. "You punks always think you're smart," the officer sneered. Then, a furious voice cut through the silence. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The officers turned pale. The crowd held its breath. Because the boy they just arrested? He was the Attorney General's son, and what happened next shook the entire city. A scorching afternoon in the heart of New York City. 16-year-old Jaden Hall steps out of an electronics store, holding a brand new iPhone in his hand. His face glows with excitement. He's been saving up for months, working after school, and finally, he could afford the phone. But before he can take 10 steps down the sidewalk, a loud, sharp voice stops him. "Hey, stop right there!" Two uniformed police officers, Officer Reynolds and Officer Carter, are already closing in, hands on their holsters. The bustling street slows as curious onlookers glance over. "Put the phone down, and hands where we can see them," Reynolds barks. Jaden's excitement turns to confusion. What the hell is happening? He looks around, trying to understand if they're talking to him. "What? I didn't do anything," he stammers. Reynolds snatches his wrist, yanking it behind his back. The phone falls to the ground, screen shattering against the pavement. Jaden flinches, more from shock than pain. "You think we're stupid? We got a report of a stolen phone matching that exact description. Black teenager, red hoodie, right outside this store," Carter sneers. "It's mine. I literally just bought it," Jaden protests, twisting to face them. A moment of raw humiliation. People stop and stare, some pulling out their phones to record. A woman gasps. A little girl clutches her mother's hand, but no one steps in. Carter shoves Jaden harder against the store's window, his cheek pressing against the glass. "You punks always think you're smart, but we know exactly who you are." A siren wails in the distance as Jaden's breath comes in short gasps. His wrists burn from the too tight cuffs. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. And then, just before the police radio crackles, a voice slices through the tension. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The crowd parts as Jonathan Hall, New York's Attorney General, strides forward, his face a storm of barely controlled fury. Reynolds goes pale. Carter blinks in confusion. "This your kid, sir?" Jonathan doesn't answer. He looks at his son, scared, cuffed, humiliated, and rage floods his expression. Jaden's breath is shallow, his pulse erratic as the cruiser's interior closes in around him. His wrists ache from the metal cuffs, still locked too tight. Through the slightly open window, he hears his father's voice, sharp, controlled, lethal. Outside, Jonathan Hall stands rigid, his glare drilling into the two officers like a blade. His tone is quiet, but it carries the kind of authority that demands answers. "This is a mistake," Reynolds stammers, sweat glistening on his forehead. Jonathan tilts his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "A mistake?" His voice is calm, but it cuts like glass. "You shoved my son against a window, humiliated him in front of a crowd, and put him in cuffs. Because he bought a phone?" Carter shifts uncomfortably, but keeps his arms crossed, trying to hold his ground. Trying. "Sir, we received a report. The suspect was described as..." Jonathan's eyes narrow, his jaw tightening. "Black, male, hoodie." He spits the words back at them, letting the weight of their meaning hang in the air like a loaded gun. Carter falters, lips parting as if he's about to explain, but Jonathan isn't interested in excuses. "Save it," he snaps. The growing crowd watches, phones held high. The officers shift under the scrutiny, but Jonathan is far from finished. "Did you ask for proof of purchase? Did you question him first? Did you do anything before deciding my son was guilty?" His voice doesn't rise, but the pressure in it is crushing. Silence. The officers don't answer, because they can't. Jaden sits frozen in the back seat, the weight of their judgment still suffocating him. He can feel it in the stares of the people watching, the ones who assumed, like the officers did, that he didn't belong. Jonathan exhales sharply. He turns to the crowd, his voice ice cold. "Did anyone see my son steal anything?" Silence. Only the distant honk of a car somewhere down the street. Then, Jonathan looks back at the officers, his eyes burning with something undeniable. "Take the damn cuffs off." The house is quiet, but the tension is suffocating. Jaden sits at the kitchen table, arms crossed, his whole body still vibrating with anger. His mind replays the scene over and over, the cuffs, the sneering officers, the crushing weight of humiliation. His mother, Camille Hall, stands beside him, one hand gently rubbing his shoulder, though it does little to calm him. Her face is tight with worry, but she says nothing. She knows there are no words that can make this feel right. Across the room, Jonathan Hall paces, phone pressed to his ear, his voice a sharp blade cutting through the silence. "This isn't just about my son," he says, each word laced with fury. "This is about the thousands of black boys who get profiled, harassed, and brutalized because officers assume guilt before innocence." Jaden grips the edge of the table, knuckles white. The rage inside him is sharp, raw. "They looked at me like I was nothing, Dad." His voice is hoarse, cracking under the weight of everything he's held back. Not just the cuffs, not just today, but years of knowing this could happen, that it would happen. Jonathan stops pacing. He turns, really looks at his son, the way his shoulders are hunched, the way his fingers tremble as they tighten into fists. His jaw clenches. That's why this isn't ending here. And it doesn't. By morning, the footage has gone viral. The video of Jaden being shoved against the store window, the officers' sneering faces, Jonathan's cold fury. It's everywhere. News anchors dissect every second of the incident. Social media explodes with outrage. The NYPD is scrambling, caught in the storm. Jonathan calls a press conference. Jaden stands beside him, staring out at the sea of cameras, the flashing lights, the expectant faces. His father steps forward, his voice steady, unwavering. "Yesterday, my son was handcuffed for existing, and I am not asking for an apology. I am demanding change." A murmur ripples through the crowd. Reporters scribble furiously. "This city cannot call itself just if its police treat young black boys as criminals before citizens. I will be pushing for immediate policy reforms, mandatory bias training, and accountability for every single officer who engages in racial profiling." Jaden watches, his father's words sinking deep. This isn't just about him. It never was. For the first time since that awful moment outside the store, hope doesn't feel impossible. 2 weeks later, the police department announces sweeping changes. Officers will be required to undergo racial bias training. New body cam policies are enforced, and complaints of racial profiling will carry severe disciplinary action. Carter and Reynolds are suspended pending investigation. At school, Jaden walks through the halls, head held higher than before. People recognize him now, not just as a victim, but as someone whose story changed things. A younger black student, no more than 14, hesitates before approaching. "Hey, I saw what happened to you on the news. It's messed up, but thank you for fighting back." Jaden nods, his chest tightening. "We fight for each other," he says. That night, Jonathan sits beside Jaden on the couch, the TV flickering with news coverage. "You okay?" Jonathan asks. Jaden exhales. He isn't okay. Not completely, but he's getting there. "Yeah, because we didn't let them win." Jonathan squeezes his son's shoulder. No, we didn't. And for the first time since that awful day, Jaden smiles.